Good afternoon, everybody. So today we're going to talk about the reticular activating system. But we're going to start out with just a basic piece of knowledge, and that is that stimuli determines how your brain and body is going to respond, right? We all know this. This is nothing new. We all know that stimuli is going to produce physiological changes in our body due to the emotions that we experience after experiencing that stimuli, right? So, and then those basically those chemical responses are going to determine how we will choose to behave or interact with our environment. So the reticular activating system is a neural system, and it does start in your brain stem via your central nervous system, right? So we have all of our senses coming up through our central nervous system into our brain stem. And once it goes into our brain stem, that information then goes to our thalamus, which is basically the gatekeeper, right? That gatekeeper is going to determine how we should respond to that external environment and stimuli. Then, based on what the thalamus says, it either says, hey, all right, we're cool, let's send this information up to our cerebral cortex because we're not facing any kind of danger or threat, so we're good. We could use our higher level functioning parts of our brain. However, if the thalamus based on the sensory input that's coming in, if it feels like there is a threat in our external environment, it will set us up to respond to that threat via chemical responses. So we had that stimuli coming in, and our reticular activating system allows us what to figure out, what to prioritize. So as those senses come in up through our central nervous system into our brain stem, our RAS, reticular activating system, is going to determine, based on those senses, what is prioritized and what data do we need to move up forward and bring into our consciousness based on, what's important right now. Our reticular activating system does control your awakeness and your alertness by altering your brain electrical waves. So for those of you who did not see yesterday's video on brain waves, I suggest going back and paying attention to that. But the reticular activating system, releasing these electrical chemical neurons to the different parts of our brain through those brain waves, basically lets us, or determines how we are going to behave. So either we're going to be more alert or less alert, we're going to be more awake or less awake. For example, like if the sensory comes in and there's no threat, we don't need to be highly alert and awake, right? So we may be less awake. And it can also determine if we are either more cognizant or less cognizant. Now, based on the thalamus and it determining, what chemical responses are then going to occur within our body, that is based upon our external environment and our internal emotions that are then producing these chemical reactions. So based on levels of threat, it may make us extremely awake and alert, right? Because we need to prepare for that threat. Now, if you have heard, I'm sure those of you have heard people say that emotions and strong senses and emotions cement a memory. This is why, right? So as you experience this external stimuli, and it's especially if it's horrific, like a very traumatic event or maybe PTSD or something like that, you're going to be in that heightened arousal state. And sometimes you experiencing that external stimuli, maybe even just a loud noise or pop that has nothing to do with a gunshot or war, may immediately trigger, based on that reticular activating system. It's saying, hey, we heard this sound before, and we need to prepare really, really quickly. This is where we get feedback into that overactive stress response system. So an individual, if they have more and more trauma, say if they have childhood trauma, PTSD, combat experience, or just repeated trauma, within their childhood, adulthood, that stress response system does get overactivated. And the more you're using that stress response system, the more likely you're going to use it in the future. So that's why it's really important to consider, senses lead to our emotions, and our emotions then are going to lead to our memories. Now, those with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries tend to experience disrupted or damaged reticular activating system even more than other people due to, that overactivation, creating those not so healthy chemicals such as your cortisol and adrenaline and things like that are being produced. And those chemicals may be triggered by something that does not even represent the external environment and the external reality of what is actually occurring. Now, another thing with the reticular activating system is it is predictable, right? So again, we come up through the brainstem. It goes up to the thalamus, which is our gatekeeper, and that's to figure out where to send them neurons. And if it's safe and there's no threat and we're able to maintain a relaxed nature, then those neurons pass up here and we process information, logically. We consider consequences. We think about how our actions affect others. We actually think things through. Now, I'm sure you've also heard the term neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So the more you're using those neuron pathways, the more they are going to be prominent and the more likely you're going to use them in the future. A good way that I like to explain this, this is great knowledge for anybody. If you have PTSD or you know somebody who does, I work with veterans, so I deal with a lot of them as well. And I think spouses and partners and friends need to understand that sometimes they can view actions or behaviors as impulsive or mean, when in all actuality they are on that automatic response, right? So their neurons aren't even making the front part of their neocortex to even think how their actions are going to affect you or anyone else until later, when they return back down to that emotional baseline level and they're actually able to consider everything that occurred in a very detailed and real way. So I like to explain neuron pathways, especially when it comes to trauma, by thinking of a path in a forest, right? So if you all envision yourself walking up to just a big, acres and acres worth of woods, and there's nothing but trees and brush, and you can't even see how to get into that tree or forest, right? Well, eventually you start, and you kind of stomp down some of them weeds, and you kind of get it in there, and you venture up into them woods. Maybe you're hunting, maybe you're hiking, whatever it is. Well, now you can sort of see a little bit of a path there, right? Well, next weekend, you decide you want to hunt in the same place, right? So you come back to that same hunting path and you hit the edge of the woods and you go to walk into those woods, and you can kind of see where you walked before. So you go ahead and go there since it's already cleared out a good bit, right? So now the path is a little bit more pronounced. Week after week after week, when you're coming back and you're using that same pathway, obviously, eventually, it's going to become a very obvious path to anyone who walks by those trees, right? They're going to see that and they're going to say, like, oh, that's a very clear clearing in this path. It's safe to go this way, and that's probably the direction of which they're going to go. Well, neuron pathways are pretty much just the same. The more we use these neuron pathways to specific parts of our brain, the more likely we're going to use them. So people who are at war or experience a lot of combat trauma and things like that, they have very pronounced neuron pathways. So now, even in situations maybe where there may not be a threat or a reason for them to react in a certain way, they have neurons that are going to their amygdala and different parts of their brain that are meant more for emergency and threat. And that is basically due to, again, them neurons like a river, and they're going to flow what's easiest. And what's been easiest is whatever path it's taken before that. So I think it's important to consider this, especially when you're dealing with anybody who has a lot of trauma or PTSD. Now, whether your stimulus reaches awareness is determined by the level of arousal it generates within the brain. So obviously, as our senses come in, if there's a lot of arousal within our stimuli and external environment, obviously it's going to put us on critical, hey, here and now behaviors. We're not going to think things through, and we're going to be very reactive. This can be really difficult, especially if you're a veteran or somebody like that who, could possibly be triggered by different things. Obviously your brain is going to see that and they're going to think, oh my God, I did this, I know this before, and they're automatically going to react in a certain way. This is where the bottoms up approach really can help, because it helps to do away with that overactive stress response system and all those neuron pathways that you spent a lot of time strengthening. We want to, prune those and create more positive neuron pathways. Now, the reticular activating system plays a crucial role in maintaining behavioral, arousal, consciousness and your motivation, as well as focus, right? So we learned from the brainwave video yesterday that in a theta state, we are very focused because our body and everything is very calm and relaxed, and our resources are not being spent, reacting to our external environment. So we're very peaceful. Therefore, we're going to be able to think things through and react in better ways. Also, as we mentioned earlier, stimuli determines how your brain and body will respond. So somebody with a lot of PTSD, they may be very hypervigilant or even impulsive. This isn't a conscious effort or behavior on their behalf. This is science, and this means that some of their systems are, overly responding, or maybe not responding at all, and maybe they need those different neuron pathways created, and you can do that through, learning new experiences, through meditation. Again, that meditation is getting back to that brainwave state and being able to be open and susceptible to that other information. I think I'll end this video with Tony Robbins. Love him. He definitely has so much really great insight. But I watched a video a long time ago where he talked about the reticular activating system, which is another one of the videos that got me started on my journey with fascination in brain and neuroscience. But he talked about his niece. She called him up and she got this new little car, and it was a car that he had never seen. I think he said it was like one of them little Mini Coopers or something like that, but he had never seen one. And he said when he saw it, he was like, "Oh, that's the craziest looking car. I can't believe I've never seen one of them before." Well, he said, after that event, then all of a sudden he started noticing these Mini Coopers all over the place, like several a day and stuff. And he said, this is, wherever your focus goes is where your behaviors are going to follow, right? But if this also does boil down to, the reticular activating system and being able to intervene, right? The whole, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It doesn't really matter. What came first, whether you have a disrupted reticular activating system, or ways of processing information neurologically and things like that. It doesn't matter. The good thing is there's always things we can do to make it better. So reach out, have a ton of resources, counseling, different therapies, whatever. If you just have questions or you can relate, feel free to shoot me a message. Good luck and God bless everybody.